everyone, welcome back to the Rebel Pro Psychic Show with your host, Athena Silver. Tonight we're having another great author on who has written Elemental Witchcraft, a Weird Woman's Book of Shadows. We're going to be talking to Salicrow tonight. So stay with us and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Let's get into it. We have Salicrow tonight to promote her new book, The Path of Elemental Witchcraft, a Weird Woman's Book of Shadows. This is a book which is not only for spiritual protection, but self-defense as well. It's a heavy book with everything you will ever need to know about elemental witchcraft, like for real. How are you, Salicrow? Welcome on the show. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm good, and it is a hefty book. There's 500 and something pages in it, so it's very thorough and covers a lot of ground.
Absolutely. I feel like I know you through reading your book. You were very open and intimate with, your path and where you come from and what you've been through and how you've become who you are today. It's a really nice journey through the magical side of your life. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you define yourself within the craft?
Sure. Well, I grew up in a house where my great-grandmother was my first teacher, and she actually raised my father, so she was more like my grandmother. But both of her parents had psychic abilities, and they didn't call it witchcraft, but I was being taught psychic skills from the time that I can remember, like 3-4 years old. And I also have a sister who we say we're twins, even though we're a year and a half apart in age, and we both are gifted. So I had the benefit of that as my foundation. And I had learned a lot about magic by the time my grandmother died when I was 12, but I didn't have a language for it because she didn't call, like she would just say, dead people talk to you, Sally, it's okay. Or sometimes things, it's okay. But by the time I was in my teens, I was studying magic on my own and taking a deeper dive in it. I think I consider myself I just call myself a witch because I have all the qualities of being a witch. I talk to dead people. I see the future and the past. I do healing and land work, and I have never chosen to be I'm going to say this nicely, part of a rigid school of magic. I feel that magic is something that is more personal than that.
Woman after my own heart. I feel the same way. I think it comes from growing up in a magical family. You're like, I've done the group thing already. Like I've worked with all these different people. Now it's time for me to push them away a little bit and figure out who I am.
Right. I have done formal studies in Druidry, and I'm a Reiki master in 6 schools of Reiki. I was in a coven for 7 years. So I have some pretty traditional background work as well as my family's. I actually think that the type of magic that my grandmother would have done would be considered Appalachian witchcraft or granny witchery. And even though I'm from the northern part of the Appalachians up in New Hampshire and Vermont, it's the same kind of settlers. There was a lot of Scotch Irish and a lot of indigenous people, and I'm part Irish Traveler and part Blackfoot. So I can look at her magic and then look at the modern things about granny witchery, and I'm like, ooh, that's her. So that was my foundation. It was not like ceremonial magic by any means. It was practical magic and a real acknowledgement for the sentience of the earth.
Wow, that's beautiful. It's so funny because I talk to a lot of different people about their lives, and you're the first one where I could be like, wow, okay, our stories kind of line up. It's just my people take place in Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. So we have the Caribbean witchcraft in our blood.
Exactly.
But when you look at the practices side by side, they are so similar. It's crazy that they developed in two very different places in the world. But when you put them, nuts and bolts, it's all very nature based. It's all ancestor practice. It's all honoring the elements and the nature around you. So at the
Yes.
base of it, it's very similar.
I think that that is probably the most natural form of witchcraft, and that's why there's
Yeah.
so many similarities in it, because I know that as I'm a professional medium, that's how I actually I'm a medium and a psychic, and that's my day gig. And then I write books and do all sorts of other stuff. But find that part of being a natural witch is in many ways more comfortable for everyday people. Like
Yeah.
my type of my clients are everyday people, and I have people who would never pick up a book on witchcraft who are buying my book that says witchcraft right on the front of it because some part of it they can resonate with because maybe their grandmother had a piece out of that she did, or they had this one aunt who did this particular thing, or they always knew that there was something about, the woods and fairies or whatever.
That's why I loved your book so much, because it's clearly written for multiple people. Like, it's not a book that you just sit down and you're like, oh, this is for the earth homies, or no, this is just for
Right,
the water people. This is
right.
like, and it meshes in with people who are kind of split level as well, who may connect with air and water and earth, or just two of
Hmm.
them. Do you have any advice for people starting out on the elemental path of witchcraft? Because it's kind of one of those things like, where do we start?
Well, actually, the book is a great place to start because I wrote it in a format that it can be read two ways. The first way should be read completely through because I am a pretty good storyteller.
Mhm.
And every section has a story of something that either happened to myself or one of my clients, and then a technique that people can practice themselves. But the book was developed to stack on top of each other, which means that things that they're learning in the beginning will be used in order to do the things that they're learning later in the book. So it's also meant to be a reference book, but I made sure that there was enough for people who are advanced practitioners to get something out of it too. But it's a great place for people who are new to magic and witchcraft to start. And even people who don't identify as witches, because here's the funny thing, my book has been in the top 100 for books on Druidism since it was pre-released on Amazon. So right now it's like one of their number one releases in Druidism, even though the front cover says witchcraft on it.
You
So
talk about trees in a certain
I
kind of
do.
way, so it
I
gives off
do.
that
And
vibe.
I am a druid as well. So but I think that it's a great place to start. And I think like you were saying, it's very practical. So even people who don't feel like they know anything about magic can become comfortable with those things. They can feel like it makes sense to them because I like to approach magic and witchcraft more from the science of it or the art
Mhm.
of it, instead of the religion of it. Because then you can be a Christian witch, you can be, I personally work with Norse gods, so like that's my personal choice. But this book is also for somebody who doesn't work with any deities or works with Greek gods or anything.
I tend to have an affinity for books like that can kind of work between the traditions, that
Right,
can fill in the blanks and be useful to more than one type of person.
right.
Um, since I notice you're a seer, I am as well. So I have to ask you, I loved each part of your divination sections, but which type of divination is your favorite?
I'm actually a tarot reader and
Nice.
a rune reader. So I've been reading tarot for the public since I was 18 years old and I'm 51. So Um, but I can read anything. Like I've had a couple stores. Sometimes I would just have specials where, okay, I'm going to do tea leaf readings. I'm going to do coffee ground readings. I'm going to do dirt readings. I'm going to do root readings. I'm going to do, because people like the novelty of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I've learned so many different kinds because I'm a bit of an obsessive learner. So, I mean, most things that I've learned, it's because I've done a deep dive into them. I've said, okay, I'm going to study this for 10 years, or I'm going to study this for, and what I mean by that is that is the subject I focus on. I might still be doing other things, but if I'm spending my money on a workshop, if I'm doing anything, this is what I'm learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I learned very similarly. I'm extremely mixed ethnicity. So
Yep.
I have learned all parts of my ancestry. I honor everybody, the good, the bad,
Yes.
everybody. And that means I have to learn their magic. So,
Yeah.
so of course I sit there and I deep dive, but I read tarot as well. The reason I particularly, stick with tarot is because I learned reading regular playing cards. My great grandmother
Hmm.
taught me how to read those. And when I found tarot when I was in middle school, and I just picked it up, and it wasn't even the major arcana that I
Yep.
connected with, it's the minor,
Right.
you
My
know.
grandmother used playing cards as well.
Yeah,
Um, I don't really need, and you probably can relate to this, I don't need anything, but it makes
for real.
people really uncomfortable. Like since the pandemic, when I've been doing mostly readings on Zoom for a couple of years, I've gone back to seeing people in person. Most of the time, I'm not really using much of anything, and I'm certainly not using a spread. I'm just like, oh, I'm going to pull a card on that. Oh, okay, this is what that is,
Yeah.
or I'm going to pull a rune on that. But I find it's more about other people being uncomfortable with me. They want to see a tool helping you do it.
Some
Not
of the
with
best,
spirit communication, though.
yeah,
Spirit
which is
communication,
strange.
people, yeah, they're okay with that. But if it's looking into their own minds and their own lives, they get a little more uncomfortable with the no tools thing.
See, I freak people out when I do readings of their energy because I stare right in your eyes. And I'm not even
Yeah,
staring at you, I'm staring into you. And you can
right.
feel it while you're having somebody
Yeah,
gaze at you.
yeah,
So I see them turn so many different colors. I start
yeah,
seeing future things, past lives, all sorts of things. Ancestors pop up, but people get so small when you look at them. They
yeah,
don't have that power that a lot of us spiritual people have, where we're like, look at us, we'll tell you the truth, tell me what you want
right.
to know. And I think that
Yeah,
that's what's so unnerving. And I do think people do like the tool of it, to see the card themselves so that they can go and look it up later and see if you're accurate, or try to trip you up in some kind of way. Because there
right.
are some people that are like that.
Exactly. I think I'm one of the reasons why I'm so open as an author is my first book that I wrote was a memoir, and
Mhm.
which is called Jump Girl, The Initiation Art of a Spirit Speaker. And that book, I was very vulnerable in telling my story of growing up psychic and my experiences because I felt like I had to be, because I figured that the people who were going to buy it would be primarily my clients.
Mhm.
And I felt like I've already looked into their life over and over and over again. So I can't I shouldn't be hiding who I am. Like it's only fair. Kind of like, well, here you go, guys. You can look. Uh,
Oh, I hear you on that. So I should probably ask you some questions about the book now.
sure.
Since I feel like I've gotten to know you a lot already. Um, so I loved the part where you speak about working with the Fae, working with the divas, working with the different gnomes and trolls, and the difference in the gnomes and trolls. I really got a kick out of that part in particular, because like as I'm reading it, I'm just going through it and I'm going, oh my God, that's exactly how you described this one place in this backyard and this one place I saw on this trail. It
Yeah.
really kind of centered me in it to realize like I'm not crazy. I am experiencing these elemental spirits around me.
Mhm.
I really, let me tell you a quick story about my Fae experience. I legit saw fairies in my room. This happened like 2 years ago. I was just sitting there watching TV, minding my own business, and it came out of the corner. It was like a ball of light. And I looked at it, and it took me a couple seconds to like realize and process what I was seeing. But it
Yep.
looked like a big, shimmering ball of light, and I could make out like wings and legs. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that is not a bug. Like
Yeah.
it was like iridescent colored. And then it literally flew into me, and I felt the weight of it. That's what caught my attention. I was like, like I felt that. And then it
Right.
disappeared and flew away. Um, what do you make of seeing elemental spirits in your own house?
Well, Um, a lot of it is if you're a psychically sensitive or a magically sensitive person, it's going to be more likely. You can definitely set, I have brownies every year. I
Hmm.
live in northern Vermont, about 40 minutes from the Canadian border, and rurally, and I've really worked on my land, but my land was active when I bought this place. So
Hmm.
before I did anything, it was like, holy, oh my. Um, and what you probably saw was probably sylph, which is an air
Okay.
elemental, because they are the ones who are usually seen as balls of light, and especially floating around.
I've seen them in a
Brownies,
few different colors.
yep,
That
that's,
particular time, it was like champagne kind of color, and
yep,
then I've also seen them as like a iridescent, like purple bluish kind of color
yep.
too.
I did
And
it,
I've
took a video last, well, it was right before COVID. I was in Florida and I took a video, and I wasn't trying to take a video of that. I was in a state park near my in-laws' house, and this all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, because like I could see this sylph moving around, and it was, I was able to blow it up. And what I saw inside of it, and it wasn't the light, because people like to say that, and it wasn't even
hmm.
accurate for being the light. And it was a kind of like a pinkish color and some champagne. And then inside there was actually these little balls of light that were connected
Yes,
to it. Okay, so
yes,
you might have interpreted those as
that's
those are the legs and the wings, but you got to remember that an elemental being doesn't actually have a human form. What we're seeing is an astral projection of it. It's just like how a dead loved one can show themselves as a 6-year-old kid or a 90-year-old man.
hmm.
Like the form can change, but the colors are really interesting, and they do have um there's definitely movement in it. That's the strange thing,
Yeah.
is the colors themselves are moving or shifting. It's pretty cool.
And you could see through it, which I thought was
Yes.
really bizarre because it's like
Yep.
the weight that it felt like, like a really big bug,
Yep.
crashed into you. But it's like I looked at it, I'm like, that doesn't look like it's supposed to feel that way when it hits you,
Right. But
you
that's
know?
probably the same thing as like when a spirit, they probably wanted you to feel them, because like when a human spirit wants you to feel them, if you're a person who's sensitive,
Hmm.
you can physically feel them. I've had them move my hair. I've had them, like physically. I was in my first book, I wrote about being goosed by a spirit in when I owned a bar. Like I thought my husband had snuck into the bar. I was putting beer away, and I thought he had snuck in. And we did have a spirit there, but I was like, it is not okay for you to touch me. Like
Oh, I
it
have a
was
no touching rule. I
right.
have,
Well,
you could
I was in
talk to
my
me all you want,
20s.
just don't touch
Right.
me.
I was in my 20s. That was when we established the no touching rules.
Yeah, I was in a cemetery years ago and somebody like it, I was wearing my hair up and somebody yanked me by the ponytail. And like I could
Right.
feel my neck hurt and everything. After that, I was like, yeah, no, don't be
No
touching me.
touching. Right. No touching. Right. Right. But people who are naturally gifted often have a lot of experiences that they don't feel like they have any control of, because they haven't learned how to drive yet. They haven't learned how to
Yeah.
protect themselves. This book offers a lot in protection, psychic protection as well. So people who are learning how to protect themselves, not just from nature spirits or any kind of entity, but even human beings.
I want to go back because I'm an ancestral witch. I want to get back to that topic because you brought up in your book working with graveyard dirt and how to do it
Yeah.
properly and the many uses for it with working with ancestors that are associated with this dirt. Would you mind
Mhm.
talking a little bit about that? Because I know my
Sure.
viewers love that topic.
Sure. My grandmother was a self-appointed graveyard maintenance person. Like she didn't actually have a job, but we would
Mhm.
go with her to like old graves, and she would take care of them. And she recycled graveyard flowers, like the plastic ones, and she would paint them and then resell them to people too, which I mean, so she was really an interesting woman. But she collected dirt, and you can do this really easily by, you don't have to be invasive. Almost every gravestone has gets overgrown, like the shrub grass kind of grows onto the flat stones or up the tall ones. And when you're cutting that back, you can also just scoop up a little bit of the sand that comes out of that dirt. So you're not actually doing anything that would be considered offensive or, defacing a grave. You're just
Yes.
actually cleaning up. And I am a big person on labeling and on books of shadows. You probably noticed how often I talk about that.
Hmm.
The books of shadows, making sure that you're really keeping track of what you're collecting. So I collect dirt and I collect water. I usually keep them in a little container, so I tell people save your little tiny, like mustard containers, or sometimes incense containers will come in little glass containers, but save those so you have something for collecting. And how you use graveyard dirt, first of all, um, if you're working on something that you need your ancestors behind you, it becomes an amazing component that you can use in potions. You can just actually carry it in your pocket. My grandmother used to carry dirt in her pocket when she would travel places to keep her connected to home. And she would do it particularly if there was spiritual things going to be involved as a way of grounding. And then the other pieces is I tell people that like if you are needing protection, you may go to the grave of a family member who was a soldier or a police officer, and collect dirt there. And if you are in a place where it's not your own dead, then you have to be much more respectful. But same thing, go clean off their grave for them, and give offerings before you take. That's my big thing. Like a lot of
Yes.
people get into magic, and the problem I don't have a problem with Instagram. I don't have a problem with YouTube. I have a problem with a witch aesthetic being seen as witchcraft.
Yes.
And I have a problem with people who have only been studying witchcraft for like a year or two, then thinking that they're qualified to teach
Mm.
because they might be good at video, but they don't often lack actual knowledge that allows them to be trustworthy and to these other people who are just going out there looking for things.
See,
So,
I agree with that 100%. And I noticed that the more open somebody is with their practice on these Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all of those, the less practice they are, in my opinion. Because I
yes.
noticed like the old school ones will not tell you a damn thing. Like
I
they
don't
make
know
you
about that
guess.
because I think I'm pretty open about things, but I think that it's more that there's a real focus on the prettiness of it and there's not a lot of rules. And then what I was getting to with that is that it also is about what can witchcraft do for me, which is true. We
Yes.
all want to know that. But and you probably also were raised similarly, it's a responsibility, you
Yes.
know, that if you are a person who can hear the dead, then, like I always tell people, like my grandmother would kick my ass if I decided I wanted to make my money as a medium on haunted house tours because she would be wondering why I wasn't helping those spirits instead of leaving them in pain. It's like a fun group of spirits, she'd be okay with it, but if it was really like we're going to go into this like mental hospital and it's like no, she would be like, why are you not
Yeah, let those people
helping these
rest. They
souls
had a
over
hard life,
or
you
helping
know.
them cross?
Well, yeah, my thing though with the crossing is I see a lot of people that they don't connect with the spirit and ask the spirit what they want before they cross
Right.
them. And to me, I'm like, that's a hostile takeover. You're colonizing their area.
Exactly.
Get out of there. There's a reason they
Exactly.
came back. They might be
Right.
waiting for a child that passed. They might have unfinished business. They might just love the property and have good memories
Exactly.
here. They might like the people who are alive, you
I like to call it
know.
negotiation.
So my next question for you, since you are a medium and have been a medium for many years, how does that feature into working with elemental spirits and ancestral spirits and the different type of entities that you come across on your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I think that it's like changing a channel. So I have more developed skill as an ancestral medium, and working with dead human beings. Beloved dead is what I prefer. And I've certainly done a lot of like haunted house stuff for people who are having problems and all that kind of stuff. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
mostly a therapist. Like I've worked out of therapist offices. I've had therapists call me and ask me to come share office space with them. And I have clients that are all over, they're very broad. So that's where my specialty lies. But I found that elemental spirits was kind of like changing the channel on a radio or something, that I had to change my frequency to look differently. But all
Mhm.
of the same skills that are used for communicating with our ancestral spirits are the same skills that we can develop and use for working with elemental spirits, with deities, with any unseen being. And that if you develop your skill in one area, the other areas are going to come more easily. And in the book, The Path of Elemental Witchcraft, they're they are designed to help you with that. And I tell people, like, you can use these skills. Just because I'm talking about it with water elementals right now doesn't mean that you can't use it the next time you're visiting with your beloved dead.
Oh, it's been so fabulous talking to you about your
Yes,
book and
thank
about your
you.
life. It's been fascinating, getting in touch with somebody else who's grown up in a magical family, because it's not as
Yeah, it's
normal as
fun.
you think.
No, no,
So
it's
I would
not.
love just to ask you one last question. Is there any inspiration or any message that you want to convey to the readers through this book? Anything you want to leave with the listeners today? Some advice or some message that you have for them?
Sure. Um, every opportunity that I'm given when somebody asks me what I want, I tell them I want to change the world. And then I say, I don't expect that I'm doing it by myself, but if you ask me what I want, that's what I want. I want to change the world because we can do better than what we're doing. And I think that when people develop a relationship with nature and take on responsibility for nature and see the sentience of nature, they start treating it differently. And I think that when we start to recognize our own intuitive abilities and how connected we are, we act with more responsibility. So I would say, like, opening yourself is not something that you are being selfish in doing. If you're putting time into developing yourself on a spiritual level, that is what we need right now. We need more people to wake up, to connect to the world around them, to see what's really going on so that we can make a change. So, there's more people who are joining that same boat as what do you want to do? You want to change the world too, So
Absolutely.
we can
And I
do this, but we got to wake up.
and I think that your message connects to what I've seen as a medium a lot with lately in the past couple of years, is that a lot of people are being sent here on earth in this lifetime for that specific reason, to change the
Absolutely.
course of things. And I think
Yes.
that your book is definitely a really big step in the right direction to give
Thank
people
you.
who have the calling, who want to receive it, but just don't really know what to do with it. I think your book is a good, like, step one, because
Yes.
elementals are all around us and they affect us whether we realize it or not. So,
Well, and it
you know,
also covers the piece of magic that most forms of craft work with, which is calling in the directions of earth, air, fire, and water. Even if you're not working with the elemental beings as that, there is the energy that a element carries, like the communication of air and the manifesting ability of earth, like all of those things are also practical and available in that book.
very nice. Thank you. Do you have any projects coming up? Anything interesting that you'd like to let listeners in on, let them know about?
I always do. I have another book that's coming out next year. It's already with a publisher. It's called Spirit Speaker, A Medium's Guide to Death and Dying. And I also, my
Ooh,
first book, which is Jump Girl, The Initiation and Art of a Spirit Speaker, is already available. That came out in 2018. I have a elemental retreat that is coming up in July that people can find on my website, as well as I have a online school of magic. It's called Salicrow School of Magic. It should be back up next month. I took it down to kind of give it a facelift. I have a 12 module course that is developed to go with the path of elemental witchcraft. And each module has Oh, geez. I think it's got like 3.5 hours of video, and it
Wow.
has audio journeys and written material. It's really thorough. I'm a definitely a brownie point kind of gal. Like I did this extra essay.
Well, but you're going the extra mile where people need it. So tell us all how we can keep in touch with you. Do you have any social media links, a
I
website? Let us in
do.
on that.
Sure. So my website is salicrow.com, and you can find all sorts of stuff about me there, including the fact that I collaborated with Alex Lozier Jewelry, who is a amazing jeweler. You can find that info, Alex Lozier Jewelry, on a elemental magic jewelry collection that comes out in summer solstice this year. So I have a lot of really cool stuff. You can find most of it on my website, but you can also find me on Facebook, under Salicrow, one word, psychic medium, and you can find me on Instagram. And you know, I'm always out and about. I'm a blogger, so I have been doing, if you're interested in tarot, I've been doing a series on the tarot. It's on my website. Everything can be found there. But I started with the court. No, I started with the major arcana, then I went on to the court, then I went on to the suits, and then I just did numerology and the tarot. So like it's a very significant amount of files you can find on the tarot that I've been doing once a week for, the last 9 months or something. So
That's awesome.
yeah, my brain just doesn't stop. So
Mine either. It's the ADHD power.
or the crow. Crow
Or the
power.
crow. Well, for everybody, thank you, Salicrow, for being on. Her book is The Path of Elemental Witchcraft, a Wyrd Woman's Book of Shadows. It's available where you get your good books. I am Athena Silver, I'm a professional psychic medium. If anybody would like to have a tarot reading with me, I also do mediumship readings and other spiritual services. My website is readingswithathenasilver.com. My Instagram is @athena.silver, and my TikTok is @athena_silver. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of Rebel Crow. For free episodes, please take a look at our website, rebelcrowpsychicshow.com. We release new episodes bi-weekly on Thursdays on YouTube and on all major podcasting platforms. We hope